watching the Saints game yesterday, what a wild game that was. Two different football games. Jake Haener gets the start. I had said last week I thought Rattler would get the start, but they started Haener. I'm not sure if that decision was made because they felt like it was the best way to win the game. I'm not sure if it was made because they gave Rattler his shot, and now we got to give Haener his shot. I'm not really sure why the decision was made to go to Jake Haener, but I can tell you this, it shouldn't happen again. Because Spencer Rattler's upside and potential and playmaking ability dwarf Jake Haener. And Haener's strength is said to be his decision-making, quick reactions, decisiveness, all that kind of stuff. None of that was on display. And I'm not here to suggest that a man's entire career goes down the toilet because of 30 minutes of football. But I'm here to tell you that Spencer Rattler is a better player and has a far brighter future, a far higher ceiling than Jake Haener. It's not even close. So he ought to play the rest of the way until Derek Carr is ready to go. Like, that's not a hot take based on how the game went. But, like, I didn't see anything from Jake Haener in that first 30 minutes that would suggest that he deserves another shake at this, especially when you saw what Rattler did in the second half. Haener completed 4 passes in the first half. Rattler led 4 scoring drives in the second half. I know the Saints offense is a mash unit. The offensive line's gotten a little healthier, but the weapons are gone. Kamara goes out. It's a tough spot for any young quarterback to go into. It's a tough spot for Derek Carr to go into. But Rattler was far superior to Haener in every way. And I'm willing to deal with potentially a poor decision, to deal with over-trusting a big arm, some of the mistakes that are going to come from a young quarterback. To have the upside and the playmaking ability, Haener just looked lost, quite frankly. And maybe Haener would be a better option if you were in a well-oiled machine of an offense. If you were plugging him in for an injured Jared Goff up in Detroit and you had that dominant offensive line and you had 2 great running backs and one of the best receivers in the league and everything was really set up, a great tight end, Laporta, then maybe Haener goes in there and it runs a little bit more efficiently. That's just not the case with what New Orleans has going on right now. So while this is probably a discussion as to who's the backup quarterback, which isn't really that big a deal, on the slight chance that you might have your next franchise quarterback, it's definitely Rattler and not Haener. Give him a shot. He needs to play. That first half was awful. It reminded me, and LSU fans in this market will remember, it reminded me of LSU's first half in the 2011 SEC Championship game. Now, the Saints were a little bit more productive than LSU was in that half. LSU didn't get a first down in that half. The Saints barely got a first down. And I realized that Haener had 2 balls that were dropped. I realized that Haener had one big play that was taken back from a penalty, and there were some things working against him. But Rattler came in, looked composed, looked poised, and let it rip, and did a really, really good job. And then the Saints defense cranked up the pass rush and really got after Jayden Daniels. We know Jayden here in this market, and we know that he is not prone to putting the ball in harm's way. But in that way, when he doesn't put the ball in harm's way, he will take some sacks. And the Saints were able to get back there and get after him for 8 sacks in the game. And I was encouraged by a lot of what I saw from the Saints up front. I thought Brian Brzee showed up and made a couple plays. I thought Chase Young looked really good. And I thought that the Saints in the second half played a great half of football. They held a Washington team to only 6 points. Now, caveat here, as again, I've tossed a couple of those in. You lost Terry McLaurin twice, and Jayden didn't hit him. I know that very well because I was in a fantasy football playoff game yesterday and had Terry McLaurin. And candidly, sorry, Saints fans, I was a little ticked because there were 2 60-plus yard touchdowns that came right off the board because Jayden misfired. One was a little bit long, and the other one was just off the fingertips of McLaurin. So I can't throw all the bouquets to the Saints defense, but it was good enough to keep the Saints in the game. And then, look, Spencer Rattler led you right down and hit Foster Moreau for the touchdown on the last play of the game. And I thought Darren Rizzi did exactly the right thing. Exactly the right thing. You're not playing for anything. And Washington's better than you. So why would you go to overtime, risk giving the ball right back to Jayden Daniels? Instead, you got 3 yards to go win the game. Pull a stunner of an upset. You're down 14-0 at the half. Climb all the way back. Yeah. I don't know if I love the play call, rolling it right, cutting the field down, but it didn't work. it doesn't mean it was the wrong thing to do. It was the right thing to do. And I got a text message in my 10-man group text after the game went final. The Saints fan said, perfect result. Rattler looked good. Defense showed some signs. And you didn't lose any draft position. So I think that's probably the way to go for it. This is something we have now discussed for a month, but I'll continue to bring it up. Like, I'm not going to tell you you're an idiot for pulling for your team to win football games. Like, that is a reasonable thing to do. But I also think it's reasonable to realize that moving up in the draft is a good thing for the Saints franchise. And maybe whether you had the 12th pick or the 11th pick doesn't matter. Maybe it does. And wouldn't you rather just err on the good side? Wouldn't you rather just take the chance out of it and just do move up? I mean, I could bring you the most famous example in Saints history that one spot cost you Patrick Mahomes. That's the most drastic example of what I'm talking about here. But that point still remains. The 10th pick is better than the 12th pick. The 9th pick is better than the 10th pick. So if you're a Saints fan right now, losses are not terrible, especially when Kendre Miller shows some flashes, when Spencer Rattler shows some flashes, especially when Brian Brzee shows some flashes. Like, when you have young players that are put out there and start to take some strides, that's a real positive, even if the actual result of the game is a negative. There's some LSU fans that are glad that Jayden gets another win, moves to 9 wins, inches closer to the playoffs. I'm not really going to talk about it from that angle because that's not what anybody really wants to hear about. This is a Saints segment, a Saints market. But from a Saints perspective, I think that's a good result. You played tough against one of the better teams in the NFC. Some of your young guys stepped up. Your coach did the right thing. And you just come up short. But, hey, you've got the ability to move up in the draft. And while you've got 5 wins, and there are some teams that have significantly fewer than that, and you're certainly not going to pick first or second in this draft, if you move into that top 10, I think that's a good thing. The draft becomes the most important aspect of this organization. And so while you can sit there in the fourth quarter and enjoy the heck out of the Saints fighting and scrapping and clawing and showing something from a rookie quarterback, when you look back at it and you peel it to 5,000 feet, you realize, okay, this team, this iteration of the Saints is not really going anywhere. The draft and the player that you get for potentially 5 seasons is more impactful than this 3 hours in the dome. You just got to get it right. So this was always going to be one of the tougher games on the schedule. I think there are a couple more that the Saints very well could win. I don't believe one of those is coming up on Monday in Green Bay. I checked the high, by the way. It's like 26 on Monday. The sun will be long gone down when those two teams kick it off. So it'll be real chilly up on the frozen tundra coming up on Monday. But I think you can absolutely beat the Raiders. At the Bucs, going to be difficult. They're playing good football right now. But I don't think it's the worst thing in the world that the Saints lost this game. I thought there were some real positives to take from the Saints. And, you know, I think the one thing that you could point to and say, hey, they really needed to win because of this, if you really believe in Darren Rizzi as the next head coach of the Saints, I'm a little skeptical of that myself. But if you believe he's the guy, he needs to win as many games as possible. And every time you lose one, it feels like it becomes less likely that he's the next coach. But I do think he's warranted an interview at this point because I think he's done a really good job. You're talking about piloting this team to wins over Atlanta and Cleveland. You played a tough game against a good Rams team. You go up to New York and do enough to win that game against an awful team, but on the road, and then you come home against Washington, who is a quality football team, and you darn near stole it at the end of the game. So the Saints will play the Packers coming up on Monday Night Football, 7:15 on Monday on ESPN. We'll talk about that as the week progresses. Hey, it's Hunt. Thanks for watching Hunt on Saints. Before you leave, help us out a little bit. Hit that like button, leave your comments in the section below, and hit that subscribe button so you get all our content right here from Hunt on Saints. We'll see you next time.